One thing that will forever be burned into my brain is the last known photo of Andrew McCauley and his final words before being lost at sea. On January 11th, 2007, 38-year-old Andrew McCauley attempted to kayak almost 1,000 miles across the Tasman Sea from Australia to New Zealand. This didn't seem crazy to him because he was a mountaineer and a really experienced sea kayaker, having completed multiple long-distance solo kayaks in the past. He even led an expedition where he paddled over 500 miles on his kayak, but he wanted to do something bigger, something that no one had ever done before. So his goal was to be the first person ever to solo kayak non-stop across the Tasman Sea. But his journey would only last 1 month as he completely disappeared. Andrew's trip started out great. He would document his travels for his family by taking daily photos and videos of himself on the water, and he seemed to have a nice little setup. He was paddling on a new 19-foot insulated kayak with a yellow fiberglass canopy that had a cartoon face on it, which he named Casper. This was placed on the cockpit for protection against rough storms out on the open water, and when he went to sleep at night, he would seal himself inside, allowing a ventilator to let in airflow, but it prevented any water from getting inside the kayak if it became submerged. But suddenly, a month into his journey, he encountered a massive storm with dangerous waves that sent him and his kayak into multiple barrel rolls 30 feet under the waves. Somehow Andrew survived the storm with only a little bit of damage to his kayak, and things seemed to be turning around. He even sent his wife and young son a message saying, quote, "See you 9 a.m. Sunday." So his friends and family started planning his welcome home party. But on the evening of February 9th, just 1 day later, he sent out a horrifying distress call, and it's something that I will never be able to forget.
Just in your kayak is sinking. Kayak 1, kayak 1, kayak 1.
Andrew disappeared after this, and by the next night, a massive search was conducted in the part of the ocean where he was most likely to be. But the only thing ever found was his upturned kayak. It was only 35 miles short of his intended destination, which is heartbreaking. What's strange though is that his kayak was in near perfect condition, only having suffered minor cosmetic damage from the storm the night before. Andrew's paddle, phone, GPS tracker, and his emergency radio were all still inside the kayak. Search and Rescue also found one memory stick from his camera that happened to still be intact, and on it were the last known images of Andrew. This is the last photo that he ever took, and it's haunting. You can see the absolute fear and horror in his eyes. 3 days later, the search for him was officially called off, and to this day, he has never been found. Because of the strange condition in which his kayak was found, conspiracy theories started to spread about what really happened to Andrew that night. But the most logical explanation is that he likely capsized while Casper, the canopy, was out of place. If Casper wasn't secured in just the right position, it would fill with water like a bucket. So if he capsized, he would have to swim out of the kayak, push it upright, and then climb back in, which would be incredibly hard to do in a massive storm and just in general. So the theory is that he did capsize at some point, and with the kayak being so heavy with all of his gear, it was probably too heavy to flip back over. He then likely got separated and drowned. Although his body has never been found, Andrew is presumed dead and is likely somewhere still out there in the Tasman Sea.
This is Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, short for bind, torture, kill. This evil creature was on a killing spree from 1974 to 1991 and almost got away with it. He wasn't caught until 30 years after his killing spree started in one of the most low IQ ways I've ever heard of a serial killer getting caught. Unlike most serial killers, Dennis Rader came from a normal childhood, no abuse or traumatic events that we're aware of. Actually, the only thing abnormal about Dennis's childhood was himself. From an incredibly young age, he had dark interests and dark fantasies. He was a peeping Tom and also would hurt neighborhood animals and pets. Dennis got married in 1971, 3 years before he would start killing. Him and his wife had 2 children, and they were the all-American family, living the American dream, and Dennis was definitely seen as your typical family man. Dennis worked multiple jobs. He was the president of the council of his church. He was also the Cub Scout leader of his son's Boy Scout troop. He was also living a double life. Dennis would later explain to investigators when he got caught that he killed because there was a force within him that he called Factor X, and it would turn him into the Minotaur when he was going dark. If you've ever watched Dexter, the TV show, think of Dexter and his dark passenger. Dennis's first victims were a family, Julie and Joseph Otero, and their two younger children, 11-year-old Josie and 9-year-old Joey. And it was actually their three older children that found their bodies when they returned home from school. His typical MO was that he would stalk a woman for a few weeks to learn their schedule, and then he would either break into their homes while they were away and wait for them to get home, or he would force himself into their homes while they were there. And then he had like this like fake story that he was like a man on the run from a different state, and he only needed to come into their home so he could rob them for like money, food, and their car. There are some pretty terrifying details about Dennis's killing spree that he would tell investigators when he would get caught. One of them being is after stalking one of his potential victims for a few weeks to learn her schedule, he waited in her home after breaking in and waited for her to get home, but she was like late coming home. I don't know if she got stuck in traffic or if she made plans for after work, but he got so bored of waiting for her that he just left, sparing her life, and then he randomly broke into the home of another woman who was a single mom and took her life in front of her children. Also, during his years of being active as a serial killer, Dennis Rader worked for a home security system company, installing security systems for homes. And when news broke that there was a serial killer in his hometown of Wichita, Kansas, a lot of people started getting home security. Like, the amount of people getting home security systems skyrocketed. And Dennis Rader himself was one of the people installing many of the home security systems. So a lot of people allowed Dennis Rader to enter their home to install home security systems because they were afraid of the serial killer, and he was the one that they were afraid of. In 2004, it had been 13 years since BTK had had a victim. He would later say that he just got busy being a father. Well, the media started saying that people weren't afraid of BTK anymore, and he was either, passed away or in prison for an unrelated crime, or was just too old to be a serial killer anymore. And Dennis Rader did not like this, not one bit. You see, at the end of the day, Dennis Rader is a narcissist who desperately needs attention and to feel special. Some people also refer to him as a criminal mastermind, but that is not true. It's a fluke that he did not get caught for 30 years. This man is incredibly stupid, and it would actually be his own stupidity and his need for attention that would lead to him getting caught. He wanted people to know that he was still out there, so he began leaving things for the local newspaper, the local news outlet, and also the investigators on his case. Things like letters, poems, word puzzles. He thinks that he's like Zodiac or something. He would also leave details about his crimes that were not released to the public, as well as trophies he had taken from his victims. And on 2 different times, he left dolls that were tied up to look like his victims, like binded up. So not only were they able to find out what car he drove because they looked at the surveillance footage of one of the places he dropped off one of these packages, but he ended up doing, I swear, the dumbest thing I've ever heard of a serial killer doing that led to them getting caught. In one of his communications with investigators, he asked them that if he were to give them a document on a floppy disk, if they were able to track what computer it came from. So the investigators took out an ad in the newspaper and told him, like, nah, man, you can send us a disk. We won't be able to trace you at all. You're good. And he believed it. Within minutes of receiving the disk, investigators were able to track that it came from the computer of the church that he was council president of, but it literally said on the document that it was last modified by Dennis. Dennis ended up making a full confession and was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, where he is still alive today, rotting away in prison. He actually has to spend most of his sentence in solitary confinement to keep him safe from other prisoners. I say let him out with the other inmates, but that is just me, maybe. If you watched it in this video, thank you so much. Let me know what notorious serial killer you want to see us cover next and bully and roast a little bit. I love you guys so much. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.
This mother claimed that SpongeBob forced her to kill her daughter. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Sudden Musser. The 14th of September 2021 was a day filled with love, joy and happiness, celebrating the 3rd birthday of Sutton Marie Mosser. Sutton lived in Michigan with her grandmother, her mother Justine Johnson and her uncles. She was described as being full of life and super brainy for a 3-year-old. She could almost count up to 30 and she knew all of her colours. She was the type of little girl that could make anyone laugh, anyone smile, and only 2 days after celebrating her 3rd birthday, the unthinkable would happen. Justine Johnson was diagnosed with BPD, bipolar disorder, ADHD, depression and anxiety. But despite struggling with these mental illnesses, Justine did not take her prescribed medication and instead decided to self-medicate using heroin and meth. At around 6 AM on the 16th of September, one of Justine's brothers would find Justine inside of one of the bathrooms of the family home and he believed that she was using cocaine. He asked Justine where Sutton was, to which she replied, quote, "Mind your own fucking business," which apparently was a regular response from Justine. Over the course of the day, everyone that lived in the house would eventually leave, either to go to work or to go to have fun down the beach, leaving Sutton in the care of her mother. Justine claimed that a mix of sleep deprivation, she hadn't slept in around about 2 weeks at this point, paired with withdrawals from heroin, resulted in her beginning to hallucinate, and that is when the cartoon character SpongeBob began to threaten her. She stated that SpongeBob told her that if she didn't kill her daughter, he would kill her. And following his orders, Justine would go on to ferociously stab her 3-year-old daughter Sutton at least 17 times. Sutton would sustain injuries across her neck, chest and abdomen, one of the injuries being so deep that it exposed one of her organs. Justine then wrapped up Sutton's body in a blanket, stuffed it into a black bag and left this black bag outside out the back of the house before taking off. Sutton's body would be discovered by one of her uncles in the early hours of the following morning. When police arrived and began to search the house, they would discover a bloody scene. Closet doors in one of the hallways of the home were splattered with blood. Blood would be found on both the couches in the living room and in items of the bedroom. Experts at the scene stated that the blood splatter told them that Sutton had fought for her life against her mother. 22-year-old Justine Johnson would be arrested and charged with felony murder and first-degree child abuse. She would plead guilty to both of these crimes and was handed a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. At her sentencing, she said, quote, "I lost my child, and as any mother would want justice, I also want justice for Sutton. If it was me who committed this horrific murder, I expect to be punished as any other person would be. It's what's fair for her. I apologise to my daughter, my family, her mother, and this court for my crime."
This 13-year-old consumed his classmate just out of pure curiosity. 13-year-old Yusuf was from Egypt and he was really into violent films and online games. In October of 2025, he lured his classmate Mohammed to his family's apartment. Yusuf made it seem like they were just going to hang out together, but sadly that was not the case. As the two were in the apartment together, Yusuf grabbed a wooden stick and attacked Mohammed with it and kept hitting him in the head until he died. Yusuf then found an electric saw that belonged to his father and began cutting his body into pieces. He then placed the dismembered remains in bags and scattered them all across Egypt, including behind a shopping center, a nearby pool, an open field, and even underneath a bridge. A complete stranger had come across one of these bags and they had reported it to police, and once police arrived at the scene, they started a large-scale investigation. Once Yusuf realized that he was going to be caught very soon, he ended up confessing to police that he was the one who did this. During questioning, Yusuf stated that him and Mohammed had an argument during school and this is what started it all. He also revealed that he watched scenes in violent films and online games and wanted to recreate it. Yusuf described to police what exactly happened that day. He stated he first struck Mohammed with a wooden stick, then grabbed his father's electric saw so that he could dismember his body into smaller parts so that he could fit it into his backpack before he scattered the body parts around the city. He also admitted to police that he had eaten a small part of Mohammed's flesh and stated it tasted like breaded chicken. Yusuf was transferred to a juvenile care facility for 7 days while the case was still being reviewed. Authorities also ordered a full psychological evaluation and drug testing on Yusuf. As of right now, the investigation is still ongoing, so we shall see what happens with Youssef.
One thing that will never make sense to me is when someone goes missing, yet they're found months later within a couple of miles from where they were last seen. I'm specifically talking about the disappearance of Amanda Neniger, who was literally on the phone with the police and gave them her exact coordinates in the desert, yet it would take them a month to find her. On February 27th of this year, 26-year-old Amanda Neniger left the hotel she was staying at in Blythe, California. Security cameras at the hotel captured her leaving just before 4 a.m., but 3 hours later, she called 911 after she drove off the road and asked the dispatcher for help. She said that she didn't know her exact location and was trying to get to Palm Springs to visit some family, but she thought that she might have fallen asleep at the wheel. The entire 911 call, which lasted nearly an hour, was released. Here's part of it.
What do you see around you? Do you see just fields, or is that what you see?
Well, I'm like kind of stuck in a valley. Yeah, I see just a lot of mountains. It's into like a high mountain and I'm wearing pink.
Okay, so you're on Highway 78, you think, and then what would be the nearest cross street?
I'm not sure. I see a field.
I'm trying to get a location on you, but I'm not getting one.
Amanda spends the entire call giving the dispatcher her location. She doesn't have cell service and she doesn't know which road she was traveling on, but she reads off her exact coordinates. The dispatcher struggles to pinpoint where exactly those coordinates are, but he tells Amanda that her phone is pinging off a tower in Palo Verde, California. During the call, Amanda tells the dispatcher that people are trying to kill her and that she's trying to get away. And the call ultimately ends with Amanda saying, quote, "I'm scared. Are you guys going to find me?" The 911 call went to California officers, and because the dispatcher was confused on Amanda's location, even though she had given him the exact coordinates, California police searched for her along Highway 95, about 30 to 40 miles away from where she actually was. Those officers only spent about 5 hours looking for her, and then they basically just gave up. Amanda was officially reported missing a day later when all of her calls from family went straight to voicemail and when she never called them back. A little over a week later, the La Paz County Sheriff's Office in Arizona found Amanda's blue Toyota Camry in the remote desert. It was stuck on a boulder and about 3 miles away from any major road. None of her personal belongings were in the car and Amanda was nowhere to be found. At this point, the La Paz County Sheriff's Office didn't even know about Amanda's disappearance, let alone the call she made to police just a day before she was reported missing. Since the call to dispatch was in California, they never told surrounding agencies. And like I said, it seems like they kind of just gave up on looking for her. But when the La Paz County Sheriff's Office got involved and heard that 911 call, they followed the exact coordinates that Amanda gave, and it placed them within 1.5 miles from where her car was found abandoned. So they began searching for her, even though now it was nearly 2 weeks after she disappeared. They used drones equipped with night vision, off-road vehicles, and they even searched for her on horseback. But it turned up absolutely nothing. Even the U.S. Fish and Wildlife searched for her. Amanda's mom spent weeks searching for her daughter in the desert. She called her name and even played her favorite music in hopes that Amanda would hear it. But sadly, 1 month after she disappeared, Amanda's naked body was found in the desert, curled up under a tree just outside of Cibola, Arizona. This was less than 2 miles from where her car was found abandoned weeks earlier. Her clothes were found scattered nearby, and although her cause of death is still undetermined, authorities believe that she died from exposure, and that she possibly took off her clothing to cool off from the hot desert heat. What's odd is the fact that Amanda's family said that she had never been in that part of the desert before, but they did also say that she struggled with mental health and addiction in the past. Her mom said that when Amanda was detoxing, her mind went through psychosis, so this could explain how and why she ended up where she did. Regardless, the fact that Amanda gave the dispatcher her exact coordinates, yet they were still unable to find her, even though she was less than 2 miles from where her car was found, is infuriating. I just don't understand why they didn't pass this information along to other departments. This could have all been avoided, and I can't even imagine her final moments out there all alone, thinking the police were going to find you, only to have this outcome.
A child walks into the police station and tells them that she's being haunted by a woman inside of her Hello Kitty doll. And at first, cops think that she's seeing things, but they decide to check it out, just to ease her mind. But the second they step into that apartment, they are hit with this foul, rotting smell, like something has been dead for days. And sitting against the wall in the hallway is this huge Hello Kitty mermaid doll just staring at them. So they cut it open, and what they found inside made every officer stop cold. There was something hard, bloody, and disfigured. So they keep cutting, and turns out it was a human skull, no jaw, no teeth, and boiled. How do you even explain that? Turns out the skull belonged to a woman named Fan Manier, and her life was tragic from the beginning. Abandoned by her parents, grew up in an orphanage, aged out by 15, and ended up on the street. She turned to nighttime therapy just to survive. She got hooked on substances, married a man who beat her, and then had a baby boy. But years later, she tried to turn her life around. She got clean, she left her husband, but money was really hard. So she started working nighttime again, and that's when she met him. Manlock, member, and her new client. Basically someone you shouldn't be around if you want to do better. And this is where the nightmare begins, because one day she steals $500, and to him, that is unforgivable. So he sends 2 men and a 14-year-old girl who he was to kidnap Fawn from her apartment. They drag her to a rented flat, and what they do to her is straight up evil. They tortured and SA'd her for a month straight. They beat her with metal bars, kicked her over 50 times in the head, poured boiling oil over her wounds, rubbed chili paste into her open cuts, forced her to eat her own waste, and drink urine from a shoebox. It's a long list. They cooked in the same kitchen they beat her in. She was assaulted, starved, until her body couldn't take it anymore. It genuinely makes me ill just thinking about it. By April 1999, Fan slipped into a coma and passed away in that apartment. But her horror did not end there. She was drained inside of a tub and cut into pieces, and then those pieces were boiled, and then they just threw some of her body out of a window like it was trash. Then they grabbed the Hello Kitty doll, ripped the head off, and shoved her skull inside it, sewed it back shut, put it back on the shelf, and they admired it like it was some kind of trophy. Now here's what haunts me. Neighbors called police multiple times, said they smelled death, said that they saw body parts on the ground, but police didn't investigate. They didn't listen until that same 14-year-old girl started having nightmares. Fan was showing up in her dreams, screaming and taunting her, so she went to the police and told them everything. That's when they raided the apartment. That's when they found her skull inside of the doll with hair still attached to it, even finding her boiled remains inside of the fridge. All three of them were convicted, but one of them was released early. And in 2022, he assaulted a 10-year-old girl. You guys, monsters do not change, they just wait. Fan Man-yi was failed at every single stage in her life, from her childhood to death to the system letting her out. And the only thing her son has left of her is a necklace that she wore. That's all he got. No justice, no peace. So if this story disturbed you, then good, because that was her reality. Please stay safe, always ask questions, and I will see you guys in my next video. Mwah.
She was missing for years until an episode of Unsolved Mysteries aired. It was the summer of 2017 in Illinois. 9-year-old Kayla Unbehorn was a very kind, sweet, but shy girl. She never made a fuss about anything. She was very, very reserved, very well behaved. And she was treasured by her dad, Ryan. Now, Ryan had originally met Kayla's mum, Heather, back in 2003. They hit it off straight away, had a totally normal relationship. A few years later, Heather fell pregnant with Kayla, and the pair were happy about it. They planned a future together. They were really excited, and they were like, right, as soon as Kayla is born, we'll get married. So you can imagine how blindsided Ryan was when the mum gave birth to Kayla and all of a sudden wanted nothing to do with Ryan. She just ended it, and Ryan was heartbroken. But he was like, we'll have to make joint custody work for the sake of Kayla. You know, he adored his little girl. Eventually, as the years went on, he did move on with a woman called Lisa, and he regularly saw his little girl. But then Heather pulled the rug from underneath him yet again. It was like, me and Kayla are moving house to Georgia. Now, Georgia to Illinois is not just down the road. This is thousands of miles away. So he went to court. He was like, do you know what? We're going to need something like legally in writing. I'm not going to let you just remove her from my life. And even though the court did side with him and they did put an agreement in place, Heather didn't follow it. And suddenly, without warning, one day when she was supposed to drop Kayla off to Ryan, the pair of them vanished, mum and daughter, into thin air. And Ryan obviously had a hunch that Heather was responsible, but absolutely nobody could track her down anywhere. I can't imagine how powerless and how terrified he must have felt. He never gave up hope. He would tell anybody that he could about his missing daughter. He was trying to get the news out. He was trying anything to try and trace her. And that's why I personally find true crime content so helpful. People are interested in these stories, and for that reason we have TV shows like Unsolved Mysteries. This means people can share their stories and get answers. And in this case, it helped reunite this man with his baby. Now, the series Unsolved Mysteries covered Kayla's case on an episode, and a true crime girly just happened to see the episode. On an evening in May 2023, an employee at a clothing store in Westgate Regional Shopping Center in North Carolina rang police. She'd seen this girl in the shop with her mum and immediately recognized her from that broadcast. The program had shown an age progression picture. She was like, oh my god, that looks like this girl. Police showed up and they were like, oh my god, you absolutely did the right thing. This is the missing child. They arrested Heather for kidnap, and Ryan drove to North Carolina with tears in his eyes, about to reunite with his daughter. Heather was given a few years in prison, I believe, not long enough in my opinion, and Ryan and his wife got full custody of Kayla. He's around 17, 18 and is apparently thriving, living a totally normal teenage girl life.
The killer that inspired hundreds of horror movies. Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and many more were all inspired by this freak Ed Gein. Disclaimer, this is not the video that you're going to want to be eating while watching. Ed Gein was from the tiny town of Plainsfield, Wisconsin. His father, George, was an abusive alcoholic, and his mother, Augusta, hated her husband. Well, actually, she kind of hated everybody. She was a very religious woman with a strict moral code. She thought the entire world was evil and sinful, but especially women. She believed that all women were promiscuous S-workers who were instruments of the devil, except herself, of course. She thought that she was the only pure woman in the entire world. And she instilled all of these beliefs on her two sons, Henry and Ed. Augusta was like the blueprint for toxic boy moms. She wanted her sons to stay with her forever, be her little mama's boys, have no friends, and definitely no girlfriends. And it worked because Ed was obsessed with his mother, even calling her the one true love of his life. And when his father passed away in 1940, him and his mom got even closer. But Ed's brother, Henry, did not feel the same way about his mother that his younger brother did. He wanted to grow up, move out, have friends, have a wife. And he began to actually talk badly about their mother to Ed, which Ed did not like at all. And very soon after this, Ed's brother mysteriously passed away in a suspicious fire. There was a lot of shady details, and Ed was the last person to be seen with his brother. It was not ruled foul play in 1944, and to this day it's still speculated if he killed his brother, if he did not kill his brother. I definitely think he did. I think that his brother was his first victim. And only a year later, Ed's mother also passed away, and then everything changed. This was absolutely devastated for the now 39-year-old Ed. He kept his mother's bedroom in his house in pristine condition while allowing the rest of the house to get filthy and disgusting. Ed lived in this very small town where everyone knew each other and everyone thought that Ed was kind of a weirdo. He definitely gave people, especially women, the creeps, but he especially creeped out the local tavern owner, a woman named Mary Hogan. Allegedly, this lady, Mary, was similar to Ed's mother in both attitude and physical appearance. Ed would go to her tavern almost every single day to just sit there and stare at her until she went missing. Mary was actually one of 5 people to disappear in a handful of years from this very small town. Considering that the population of the town was less than 700 people, it's kind of weird. That's a lot of people to be disappearing. And in November of 1957, a 6th person would disappear. She was the owner of the local hardware store, this woman named Bernice Warden. Luckily, they were actually able to determine who her last customer was at the hardware store before she disappeared, and you guessed it, it was Ed. So officers want to question Ed, see if he saw anything, see if he knows anything. So they go to his property, which is now referred to as Ed Gein's House of Horrors. Officers are walking through Ed's property trying to find him. He might not be there, but they're walking through, and then one of the officers feels something hit his shoulder. So he looks up, and there, hanging from the ceiling, upside down by her feet, was Bernice. And this was a gruesome sight. She was missing her head and also all of her insides. Immediately, all of the officers went outside to throw up and call backup. Also inside of Ed's house was a lot of stuff that he had made out of skin and not from an animal. He made furniture like chairs and lampshades. He made clothing like shirts, leggings, corsets, gloves, all made from human skin. There was also a mask made out of a face, and there was also a belt completely made out of a specific female body part. Also, an entire wall in his house that he had lined with 9 female faces that he put up as decoration. They also found the face of the missing tavern owner, Mary, inside of a plastic bag. And you can find photos of all of the things and more that I just told you about online. I'm not your mom. I'm not going to tell you what to do, what not to look up. I'm just going to tell you, remember that you can never unsee something. So you're probably thinking that this man is obviously a serial killer and one of the most disturbing, terrifying of them all. Technically, he's not. Ed only ever confessed to unaliving Mary and Bernice, and all of the other bodies in his house he got from robbing graves. He claims in the 12 years since his mother had passed away, he could not believe that she was gone. He thought that she was still alive, so he began finding graves of women that were around the same age or kind of looked like his mom that had recently passed away, so he could use their bodies to make a full skin suit out of them. And apparently he would even go out at night in this suit so he could feel like his mom walking around in the moonlight. And then he would dance in this skin suit. Could you imagine like going out to walk your dog and seeing that? It's nightmare fuel. He claims that he only began to unalive people so that he could get the freshest material for the things that he was making. It's so gross, I'm going to be sick. Ed Gein spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric hospital before passing away in 1984. Ed went on to inspire like a majority of like the classic horror movies, and then those movies inspired the next generation of horror movies and so on and so forth. So if you're a fan of horror movies and like the horror movie genre, chances are that your favorite movies only exists because of this guy, Ed Gein. If you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much, because I know this was a rough one to get through. I'm right there with you. Recently, I asked you guys, because you guys are always asking me to cover some of the more like notorious, well-known killers throughout history, because I tend to try and like cover a lot of cases that people don't really know. So that's how I ended up covering this case today. If there's a case that you want to see me cover, let me know in the comments. I will see you guys tomorrow. I love you guys so, so much.
How do you unalive your own daughter, lie to the police for 2 years, and think no one's gonna catch on? He made mistake after mistake, so why did it take this long to stop him? She was only 12. Her name was Lori. She lived in Tallahassee, Florida. Again, Florida, with her dad, Andrew Wiley. June 2023, Andrew reports her missing after coming home from work, saying that she just ran away. Her rainbow backpack was gone, so that's kind of what he assumed. Her community showed up, flyers, candlelight visuals. Everyone is looking for this little girl. But while the world is begging for answers, Andrew is trying to flee the country. The day that he reported her missing, he booked a flight to Puerto Rico and he packed up his car. He left and drove all the way to Jacksonville Airport, but then when he got there, he randomly turned around and went right back. Nobody knows why, but that is red flag number 1, and it only gets worse from here. These cops are digging for answers. They're asking relatives, neighbors, classmates, even therapists about where she could have gone, but it is leading absolutely nowhere. Lori did not use social media. She was very reserved, very shy, so instead they decided to pull Andrew's phone record and browser history. This man was out here googling National Forest dead body and where do police look for missing children. Bro, they check his car and it reeked of bleach. The floor mats are missing. There's blood in the carpet, but not just any blood, Lori's blood. And in the trunk, the things that he left: a weapon, ammo, gloves, cleaning supplies, and all of Lori's electronics were destroyed. It's like he tried wiping her out of existence. And then almost 2 years later, a Georgia fire crew was clearing out a specific area of the woods. It was just a routine checkup for that area, but what they found stopped everything. Lori's decomposed body down to the bones, so well hidden that the first search team couldn't even find her. She was left in that field by her father with no care in the world. She had a life, she had a future, and her father is the one who took that from her. And you know what kills me? He thought that bleach and a lie would protect him and that he could just erase her and move on. But no, they arrested him, charged him with murder, and he is not getting out. I won't lie, the system was a bit late, but at least they showed up. Lori deserved so much more. No kid her age or any age deserves to be failed that badly. Apparently, Andrew even abused her, so if you feel sick after hearing this story, that just means you still have empathy. Please protect our girls, speak up, pay attention, because sometimes monsters don't look like monsters. Sometimes they call themselves dad. Stay safe. I love you guys. I will see you in my next video. Mwah.
I've heard of some creative ways that investigators have solved crimes, but never one like this one. This is how a parrot helped solve a murder investigation.
Get your building now!
I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Martin Durham. Martin, who went by Marty, and Glenna Durham were a seemingly happily married couple. They'd been together for around about 11 years, and Glenna was actually Martin's carer. In 1995, he had been involved in a horrific car accident which resulted in the whole left side of his body completely shattering, and he also sustained a brain injury so severe that it affected his memory. He had no recollection recollection of his previous marriage or even the birth of his children. The couple were described as a very friendly, social couple, and they always made time to chat to their neighbours each and every day. That is why on the 13th of May 2015, a neighbour named Connie Ream began growing concerned because she hadn't seen or heard from the couple in around about 2 days. Just the day before, Connie's husband actually jokingly texted Glenna asking her what she had done to Marty, but he received no reply. Connie would head over the road and make her way into the Durham house, concerned and wanting to check on her friends. When she walked into the couple's bedroom, she would witness an absolutely horrific scene. There were Marty and Glenna lay in pools of blood on the bedroom floor, Marty being in just his underwear and Glenna was partially covered with a blanket. When police arrived, they would pronounce 46-year-old Martin Durham dead at the scene. When another officer went to try and check Glenna's pulse, her eyes shot open and she yanked her arm away from the officer, asking him, "What are you doing?" seemingly having no idea what had gone on. It was later determined that Marty had been fatally shot 3 times and that Glenna had also been shot in the back of the head, however she somehow miraculously survived. A murder investigation began as Michigan began to hunt down Martin's killer. Throughout their inquiry, however, they kept on getting asked the same question. Had they spoken to Bud? Bud was Martin's African grey parrot, who was said to be extremely switched on, that he didn't miss anything and he never forgot a thing. Bud was actually given to Martin's ex-wife Christine after his death, and when the police approached her, she told them something that made their blood run cold. Christine showed the officers a video of Bud where he is mimicking an argument between 2 people. It's very obviously a man and a woman, but when he's mimicking one person, he has one voice and then the other person has a different voice, and they were very clearly man and woman. One of the last phrases that Bud said was something along the lines of "get your ass in here." That was the woman's voice, followed by, quote, "don't fucking shoot," in the man's voice.
Shut up! Get your moving now! Shut up!
After a 19-month-long investigation, Glenna Durham would be arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. The prosecution actually debated bringing Bud in as a witness at the trial. However, in the end, they didn't end up doing that. At the trial, it was determined that Glenna had murdered Marty and then attempted to end her own life, but was unsuccessful. This came from the couple's big financial struggles, partially thanks to Glenna's gambling addiction. She would spend upwards of thousands of dollars gambling, and she was always in the casino, and in fact the day the murder took place, they were actually about to lose their home. Glenna would be found guilty of the murder of Martin Durham, and she was handed a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
He ended his girlfriend's life because she didn't want to have a baby with him.
Man, she just didn't want to have my baby, man, and it was just like a crime of passion or something. Like, she didn't, it was like she wasn't trying to have my baby.
You wanted to have a kid?
Yeah.
You wanted to have
I don't have any children, man.
Okay. You wanted to have a kid with her, and she
just kept on telling me to punch her in the stomach.
22-year-old Jade Alvarez was from San Antonio, Texas, and was a young mom. She was described as funny, loyal, strong, and the kind of girl who always tried to see the best in people. In 2018, she graduated from high school and was raising her 3-year-old son Jeremiah, but talked about going to college. Jade had been unemployed and was experiencing housing insecurity, moving between homes of her family and friends. In March of 2023, Jade's grandmother had requested a welfare check on her. During that visit, she revealed troubling details about her life. She showed officers marks on her neck that she claimed that were from her father choking her. The visible bruises showed a pattern of abuse that unfortunately would continue with the next guy in her life. Despite these challenges, Jade remained hopeful for the future. She had dreams of providing a better life for her son, and she hoped that with starting college soon, she could provide stability for the both of them. During this time, Jade was staying with her best friend Julia Castillo, and this was only meant to be temporary until she figured out her next steps. It was during this time that Jade started dating 23-year-old Adam Bird. Adam presented himself as someone who wanted to settle down and start a family, but beneath that, he was possessive and violent. On the night of April 5th of 2023, Jade was on the phone with Adam talking about a topic that had become increasingly contentious in the relationship, and it was Adam's desire to have a child with Jade. During this phone conversation, Adam asked Jade if she could be dropped off on Capitol Avenue in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of San Antonio sometime between 10:30 to 11 p.m. Jade was dropped off, and as the two met, an argument quickly started over Adam wanting a baby and Jade not ready to have another one. But Adam wasn't going to let this slide. What Jade didn't know was that Adam had a gun hidden in the pocket of his hoodie. And this was the same gun that Adam had used to rob a store just days earlier. Without warning, Adam took out the gun and shot Jade as he walked past her. Jade was struck in the abdomen, she fell to the ground, she was wounded but not yet dead. Instead of Adam calling for help or fleeing the scene, he shoots her twice in the back of the head to ensure that she wouldn't survive. Adam wanted to make sure that if Jade didn't want to start a family with him, then she shouldn't have the opportunity to build any kind of future. He then fled the scene and left Jade's body next to her suitcase on the ground. He made sure to take her purse with him so that there would be no identification, and when police were trying to identify her body, it would take longer and he would have more time to escape. On April 6 around 6:30 a.m., the San Antonio Police Department conducted a routine patrol when they spotted something unusual. From a distance, it looked like a pile of belongings, but once they got closer, they realized it wasn't just an abandoned suitcase, it was a young woman's body lying next to it. The officer immediately called for help, but it was clear that no medical intervention could help. Since there was no witnesses at the immediate crime scene, detectives started knocking on the doors of nearby residents. They wanted to see if they had heard anything, and a few ended up coming forward that they did hear a single gunshot, followed by a woman's scream, and then a couple more gunshots, but never called it in. Once detectives identified Jade's body through fingerprints, they went to where Julia lived, which would be Jade's last home. Julia's mom answered the door and immediately denied knowing anything about Jade living there. Detectives reached Julia by phone, and her response was highly unusual. She refused to speak to investigators, claiming that she needed to contact her attorney first, which was weird because they weren't accusing her of anything, they just wanted to see if she had any more information. Since Julia didn't want to speak to investigators, they were able to contact another woman who Jade knew, and she claimed that Jade was with Adam that night. Once investigators looked up his name through the system, they saw that he had an active warrant for 2 counts of aggravated robbery just 5 days before Jade's murder. And because of this, Adam was made the prime suspect in the homicide investigation. On April 12th, just 6 days after Jade's body was found, Adam was arrested on his robbery warrant. They were interviewing him about the robbery, and he was reluctant to talk about Jade. But then he ended up confessing that he used the same weapon to unalive Jade. Over the course of the next several hours, Adam revealed that he met up with Jade to talk about having a baby, and when she told him no, he became enraged. Adam then shot Jade multiple times to make sure that she didn't suffer. Adam ended up confessing because he just wanted it to be all over. He didn't show any real remorse, he just wanted to be finished with the interrogation. In March of 2025, Adam pled guilty, took a plea deal, and was sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Inside this sorority house, something so disturbing took place that none of the students would ever recover. It was an autumn morning in 2015 in the town of Westwood. And the area is absolutely gorgeous. It's the neighborhood home to UCLA. And honestly, before all of this happened, everybody would talk about how safe it was. Andrea Del Vesco was a stunning 21-year-old student living in an apartment in the area. She was known as Andy to all her friends, and she studied psychology like me. Love that for her. And all of her friends just knew her as this friendly, super intelligent girl. She had her whole life ahead of her. She was in a sorority called the pt.282 sorority. Hopefully I'm saying that right. We don't have sororities in the UK. And one of her sorority sisters was a girl called Sarah. On the 21st of September, Sarah had a rude awakening. She was startled awake by this screaming noise and then the sound of a dog barking and barking. It was like this dog was going crazy. She was like, what is going on? It's not even 7 a.m. yet. Now she lived above Andy, so she immediately was like, I'm going to ring Andy and see if she knows what's going on. So she rang and rang and rang, and she never answered. So fair play to Sarah, she wasn't wasting any time. She immediately called the police. She just had this gut feeling that something awful had happened. So get ready to be infuriated, guys, because the police showed up, looked around, knocked on the door. They couldn't get an answer from Andy, so they just decided to leave. Bear in mind, this girl had heard screaming and a dog going crazy. So after they just buggered off, poor Sarah was left to try and work out what the hell was going on and what that noise was. So she peered down from her balcony to see if she could get any kind of better view of what had happened underneath her. and suddenly she saw smoke. Police had just left and now the apartment was on fire. And even more terrifyingly, she sees a guy leave Andy's apartment with a blanket over his head, trying to kind of conceal himself. Now, it's incredibly lucky that Sarah was looking out and watching all of this unfold, because she spotted Blanket Guy run and get into a red car. He drove off, and as he was driving away, she could just about make out there was some stickers in the back window. And this was the name of a fraternity. It was the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. Again, emergency services were called to the scene and firefighters battled this blaze. Horrifically, once the roaring flames turned to ash, they could clearly see the unmistakable shape of a body. Charred and now unrecognizable, but everybody knew this was Andy. And as if this wasn't bad enough, guys, her little dog was also found just hanging on to life, really badly burned and basically unable to breathe. The dog did get taken to an animal hospital, but they decided that the kindest thing would be to put the dog down. It was now a race against the clock to find out what evil frat guy had committed this murder. No smoke was found in Andy's lungs at the autopsy, so it was very obvious to police that she was actually already dead prior to the fire starting, which made it clear that the fire was started to try and conceal evidence. But the killer wasn't as clever as he thought. Turns out he'd stolen laptops and speakers from an apartment across the road that very same night. And in order to use the speakers, he had to go on a website and register under his name. And this guy literally put in his details into the website. So an employee from the speaker company phoned police I think we've got your guy. It was 22-year-old Alberto Medina. And he was obviously pretty much backed into a corner with this evidence. He admitted to stealing the items, and lo and behold, he had a red car just like the one Sarah had seen. He was also covered in scratch marks, which made it very clear to everybody that poor Andy had fought for her life. And the nail in the coffin for this guy was that her blood was found in his vehicle. It turns out that he had stabbed this poor girl 19 times. Now, he tried to pin the murder on his friend, Eric Marquez, but police said the evidence told a different story. Eric was given 2 years and 8 months for aiding and abetting the burglary, and Alberto was given life in prison without parole. He never admitted what his motive was, and basically denied all memory of the killing, and I wonder if we will ever truly find out.
She said, "You could tell immediately that there was a body inside of that room." 57-year-old Nancy Pfister lived in Colorado right by Buttermilk Mountain. She was born and raised in Colorado, and her family was pretty well known in the area. She was one of 3 girls to her parents. Her father's name was Art, and he was one of the co-founders of the Buttermilk ski area, which earned the family a lot of money. And her mother, Betty, was a member of the Women Air Force Service pilots during World War II. Nancy moved out of her hometown in Colorado to attend college, but she moved back to help with the family business when she was only 20 years old. She's been described to be a lovely person and having a larger-than-life personality. And it sounds like she was just a social butterfly, really. She was just the kind of person that everyone got along with, that everyone could talk to. She was just the kind of person that you feel good being around. And by the time that she was 29 years old, despite dating a few boys here and there was really no one in her life that Nancy could see herself marrying, no one that she wanted to spend forever with. But then she fell pregnant. At 29 years old, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and 10 years later, at the age of 39, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And it was just the 3 of them, and Nancy was more than content with that, and she raised both of her children as a single mother, and she absolutely adored being a mom. She was so proud of the little life that she had built for herself. It was perfect for her. February 26th of 2014 was a Wednesday. That day, Nancy's friend Kathy had been getting progressively more worried about her because Nancy had not returned her call from a few days earlier, which was pretty unlike her, so she decided to call around and see if anyone else had heard from her, and her concern only grew when she learned that Nancy had also failed to show up to work for the past 2 days. And that was alarming, so Nancy drove over to her house to see what was going on. When she walked in, she was calling out her name, but there was no answer. She walked into her bedroom and noticed that the bed looked slept on. The sheets were all over the place. The covers kind of looked like they were pulled off to one side, but other than that, there was really nothing that was standing out to her too much. That was until she started walking closer to the bed and she noticed what looked like a red liquid to be on the bed frame. Kathy then walked over to Nancy's closet, which was pretty roomy. It was a walk-in closet, but when she went to go turn the doorknob, it was locked. Luckily, she happened to be able to get a hold of a spare key. She unlocked the door, she opened it, and immediately got a whiff of a horrendous odor. When she looked up, she found Nancy. She was in the closet, still in her pajamas, deceased. She was mortified. She had been so worried about her friend, but never in a million years could she have imagined that she would have walked in on a crime scene. She grabbed her phone, and at 6:15 p.m. she made the 911 call. Police arrived and headed to the closet. Nancy's body had been wrapped from the neck down in a large trash bag, and another trash bag had been placed over her head. When they did look at her body, it was clear that she had suffered from a lot of blunt force trauma. There were signs of it all over her, but mostly the blunt force trauma had been directed at her head, on her forehead, and her right temple. She was also covered in bruises, the most of them being on the right side of her jaw, neck, and arms. The autopsy later showed that it must have been caused by a, quote, hard object with a slightly curved edge, end quote. There also looked to be something wrapped around her neck. It had been placed there intentionally. It was an electrical extension cord. And there were no defensive wounds, so it was theorized that whoever did this to Nancy did it to her while she slept. The bedroom was taped off as a crime scene, and police discovered a massive pool of red liquid underneath the mattress. So someone had done this to Nancy, that was obvious, but the fact that the perpetrator would have then taken the time to flip over the mattress before they left. Authorities asked Nancy's friend Kathy if there was anyone who would want to do something like this to her, and that's when Kathy brought up the names Trey and Nancy Styler, and because there are two Nancys, we're going to call the second Nancy by her last name Styler. Kathy told authorities that there had been recent trouble between Nancy and her tenants, who were Trey and Styler. Trey and Styler were a couple, and they were Nancy's tenants. She had rented out a portion of the house to them as a way to make a little bit of extra money. She also had rented to them for the time in which she was planning to be out of the house. She had plans to go to Australia for a few months, so she listed it as an ad saying that she was renting her house, which is when Trey and Styler reached out to her. They discussed the terms, whatever, and then they ended up moving in. But Kathy said that there was definitely some tension between them, and that became clear when they learned that Nancy had actually evicted them. She had abruptly ended her trip in Australia a week earlier, rushed home, and basically kicked them out of the house when they failed to move out on the agreed upon date. So authorities go question Trey and Styler, and they confirm that yes, they saw the ad, they reached out, they became Nancy's tenants, but then Styler, the wife, started talking really badly about Nancy. She told officers that at first she was lovely, but then as soon as they moved in, she became really demanding, and she was basically painting her out to be this horrible nightmare of a landlord, which wasn't the case at all. And it was really strange that she was talking so negatively about Nancy, given that every other person in that town had nothing but good things to say about her. So what happened? Well, after Nancy left for Australia, Trey and Styler stopped paying rent, which is the only reason that Nancy was renting out her house in the first place, right? Because she wanted to collect rent. So when they stopped paying rent and the bills were racking up, Nancy began sending them messages and emails, and she just couldn't get a hold of them. When she finally did get a hold of them, she told them that she was coming home early and that they had to be out before she got back. So they technically moved out, but they left a lot of their belongings in there. So Nancy returns home on February 22nd, 4 days before her death, and she's venting to her friend Kathy about how the tenants owe her around $14,000 for utilities and damages to the house. According to Styler, the wife, she told officers that things were not good between them, obviously, but she said that after Nancy was already back in town, she returned to the house with Trey to get their belongings. She didn't see Nancy at all that day. They took some of their stuff, they left, they came back the next morning, and she claims that the second day that they were there, she did see Nancy's dog there, but she didn't see Nancy. So she couldn't be much help because she really didn't know anything, and she doesn't know what happened to Nancy. Trey and Styler are questioned by authorities for 12 hours, but then they're released. But it wouldn't be long before authorities got the evidence that they were looking for, because when Trey and Styler moved out, they went to go and stay at a motel. In the dumpster of that motel, police found a plastic bag full of Nancy Pfeiffer's personal belongings. They also found an old hammer, and when they tested the hammer, Nancy's DNA was all over it, and Trey's DNA was all over the plastic bag. And near the area of the exact room they were staying in at that motel, officers found a key to Nancy's closet where her body was found. Trey Styler and Nancy Styler were arrested and charged with first-degree murder, but then in a complete turn of events, my jaw dropped when I read this part. Police make a third arrest. They arrest Nancy's friend, Kathy Carpenter, on charges of first-degree murder. Over the course of the investigation, police discovered a few things that made them wary of Kathy. They first thought that her 911 call sounded a little bit off, and then they thought that the information that she had on the tenants was a bit too much. So police began to develop this theory that Kathy didn't really like her friend Nancy, and that she started to become friends with the tenant Styler, and that they hung out and bonded over how much they didn't like Nancy. They also found it fishy that the day that Nancy's body was found, Styler called Kathy 3 to 4 times before the body was found. So all three of them, Kathy, Styler, and Trey, were in custody awaiting trial, but then a few weeks before the trial, Trey tells the judge that he wants to make a full confession, and he does. He tells the judge, quote, "I am guilty, Your Honor," end quote. He took full responsibility for Nancy's death, said that he acted completely alone, said that he had shown up at the house completely alone to talk to Nancy, but when he got there, she was sleeping. And according to him, that made him really angry because he could not believe that while his life was falling apart, while he was drowning in debt, Nancy was just peacefully sleeping. And then he said, quote, "I lost my mind, or at least I lost my rational mind," end quote. He said he grabbed the hammer, the trash bags, and used them to end Nancy's life while she was peacefully sleeping. He then attempted to hide her body in the closet, locked the door, and then left. With that confession, Styler, his wife, Nancy Styler, and Kathy Carpenter were released and their charges were dropped. Trey was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but on August 6th of 2015, Trey was found deceased inside of his cell, and his death was ruled an unaliving. Nancy Pfister was laid to rest by her loved ones. They had a beautiful celebration of life for her, and I will end this video with a quote describing that event. Quote, "Tears of grief seemed absent as Pfister's life was truly celebrated. Each and every person who spoke at the service recalled a woman known for her ever-present smile, and all of them told tales of a woman whose deep love of life was contagious to anyone who met her," end quote. The turn of events of Kathy being arrested threw me for a loop. It was also like 3 or 4 in the morning when I was researching this case, so maybe I was going delusional because now that I'm reading it, I'm like, is there a reason to believe that she would be involved? But when I was researching, some people still think that she could have been. But that's it for me today. Let me know what your thoughts are on this case. I love you guys very much. Hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
You don't want to know what's going on in this photo. Honestly, I have no idea how this girl is still smiling. It was February 1996 in Pennsylvania. 14-year-old Tanya Katch lived in the area with her dad and his girlfriend. Now, she was a beautiful and bright girl, but she just was not happy. Parents split up when she was little, and she had very little to do with her biological mum. And for whatever reason, she also didn't get on with her dad or her stepmom. She was kind of just isolated. She was at a very tricky age, you know, just desperate for affection and acceptance and love, and that put her in a very vulnerable position. Now, she even felt shunned at school. She didn't really have many friends, nobody that she could confide in or talk to. Again, just made her feel like an outsider. Wherever she was, whether it was home or at school, she just wasn't welcome in her eyes. So in order to cope, she started drinking, and obviously we know that just makes things a whole lot worse. No matter how hard she tried at school, she just couldn't make friends. And she decided, what is even the point in trying? And she started bunking off. So she did this a couple of times, and she was kind of known to like run away for the day occasionally, and obviously this made things a lot worse with her dad and her stepmom. Then the one day she was bunking off and she bumped into the school security guard, Tom Hose. She was like, oh my god, I'm gonna be in so much trouble. She froze. She was praying like, please don't dob me in. She was bracing herself for it, honestly, but the opposite happened. Tom chatted to her and was really nice, and he was like, don't worry, I'm not going to get you into any trouble. I know what you kids are like. I've got a son who's just 2 years younger than you. Bear in mind, she was 14. She thought, oh my god, this is so cool, like an actual adult being nice to me. Better still, he not only didn't report her for skipping class, but he started giving her presents. She'd never had anybody care for her in this way, in her mind. Suddenly he's showering her with jewelry, sweets, sometimes even like cash. She was like, I've won the jackpot here. We know he was grooming her. Then one day, out of the blue, this creep kissed her. He was a grown man, but she was kind of already under his spell. I mean, she was really loving the freedom that he gave her, and also obviously the cash and the gifts. He started to convince her that they could have a really good life together if they just run away. He was like, me and you, we've got a connection. You don't get on with your parents. We could just have a better life somewhere else. He sold her the absolute dream. He was like, you don't have to worry about going to school. You can have unlimited money. She sadly fell for it. But reality was so far removed from the promises that he made. He actually lived in this grotty house with his parents and his son. So it was A, obviously a real squeeze, and B, he obviously had to hide her. She was kept hidden, she couldn't leave the house, she couldn't even properly go to the toilet, she had to use a bucket. She was only fed leftovers that Tom could kind of like sneak into her. It was a vile existence, way worse than before. By the time she realized she'd made a terrible mistake, it was too late, she was trapped. This monster would eventually start to SA her constantly. He would convince her she was worthless and even threaten to kill her if she tried to escape. And frustratingly, because she had this history previously of running away, police really didn't want to know when she was reported missing. They kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, she's probably just gone of her own accord. And I guess she did, technically, like she wasn't bundled into a car or anything. But is it really of your own accord if you're a child and you're groomed by an adult? For years, she was kept hostage, agonizingly close to her home, just 2 miles away. But she might as well have been a million miles away because honestly, no one was looking. As the years went on, Tom kind of got more confident and took his eye off the ball a little bit. I see this in so many cases where kidnappers get sloppy as they get more confident and think they're getting away with it. When Tanya turned 18, he almost got a bit cocky and started introducing her to people. I mean, it was very risky, but he obviously thought that he was just going to get away with this. He figured, she's under my spell now, like she's never going to run away. He even gave her a new name, Nikki, which does really remind me of the JC Lee Dugard case that I covered on my podcast, a very, very similar story. But in March 2006, everything was about to change. Finally, Tanya got the courage to tell someone. Now, she was 24 by now, and I think she kind of got to the point where she was thinking it's now or never. She was at a local deli and she'd just been allowed out for a short period of time to grab some food, I believe. She got talking to a sweet older couple. Suddenly she was like, guys, can you help me? I'm Tanya. They were like, what do you mean, Tanya? And she was like, I'm Tanya Cash, the girl who went missing. If you look on Google, you will find me. Stunned, they were like, oh my god, of course we'll help you, and they immediately went to the police. The gig was up and Tom was arrested and the sick truth was revealed to everyone. But shockingly, he was only given 15 years in prison and then was released. Maybe even more shockingly to me, Tanya's own dad totally blamed her for her own disappearance. He was vile to her, he said it was her fault, and unsurprisingly, Tanya has no contact with him anymore. She now spends her time advocating for other victims.
This is the story of Joshua Cato. Peru, Nebraska, December 3rd, 2010. 19-year-old Tyler Thomas is at a party with her friends. Her and her friends attended Peru State College, but they was at a party off campus. At the party, Tyler got a little too intoxicated. So intoxicated that she started arguing with one of the girls that she came with. The argument got her kicked out of the party. One of the girls asked her, does she need a ride back to campus? And she said no and took off on foot. Shortly before 1:30 a.m., Tyler texted her friends saying that she was lost. This prompted them to leave the party because not only was she intoxicated, it was very cold that night and she did not have a coat. When the group still didn't see Tyler on their route back to the dorm, they just thought that she made it back to her room. When they got to her room and Tyler was still nowhere to be found, but all of her belongings was still on her bed, her purse, her keys, her cards, birth certificate, everything. That's when they decided to report her missing. As it turned daylight on December 3rd, that's when the intensive search started. They had divers for the Missouri River, hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, they even had dogs. It was all hands on deck. While interviewing some of Tyler's friends and dorm mates, one name stuck out to the detectives. 23-year-old Joshua Cato, who was also a student at Peru State College and also lived in the same co-ed dorm as Tyler, just a few doors down. Joshua and Tyler went on a date. Now, it's unclear what happened on that date, but after that date, the two seemed to hate each other. Tyler's friend said that the two used to get into heated arguments in front of everybody. Multiple students said that they've heard Joshua call Tyler derogatory comments. Wonder what word that was. On December 4th, Joshua got pulled in for questioning. He did admit to seeing Tyler walking back to the dorms while he was on his way back to the dorms with his friends to hang out. But he said he never said anything to her. When Joshua and his friends got back to the dorm, he said he separated from them because his stomach started hurting out of nowhere. I bet it did. He said he stayed in his room the entire night because he was back and forth to the bathroom. But what Joshua didn't know is that the detective questioned one of his friends that was riding with him. And that friend said hanging out was never the plan. We were all just going back to our dorm. On December 6th, Joshua got called back in for questioning with evidence of him on the surveillance camera outside of his dorm when he told the investigators that he never left his room. Joshua said, "Oh, yeah, I forgot. I went to go get change at some point that night." The investigator said, "Well, why is your cell phone pinging at the Missouri River?" He said, I did go smoke some marijuana as well. But I was by myself. Wasn't nobody with me." They said, "Oh, yeah? Well, why is Tyler's phone pinging at the Missouri River as well?" He said he didn't have no clue. On December 7th, the cops had had enough. They had called Joshua in for questioning yet again, telling him that his timeline did not add up. And Joshua came with one last outlandish story. Joshua said, "You won't believe me if I tell you this." The investigator said, "Try me." He said on his way to the river, Tyler popped out of some bushes. He let her in his car and the both went to the river to smoke. While they was at the river smoking, she had asked him to drive her to Omaha. And when he said no, she said, "I will do something for it." And that something was fellatio. He said Tyler gave him fellatio, and when he was done, he finished in a napkin and threw it to the side and went to go stand at the end of the river. And when he was standing there, he said, "You know what? I don't want to take you to Omaha." And that's when Tyler got enraged and started hitting and kicking him and threw her cell phone at him, which landed in the water. He said he grabbed her and told her to stop, and then he left. He said when he was leaving, Tyler was still screaming. The investigator said, "Put your hands behind your goddamn back." Joshua was arrested in connection of Tyler's disappearance, but he wasn't prosecuted at that time. But when he was in jail, another girl from the college came forth to detectives and said Joshua sexually assaulted her 3 times on Halloween, which was about a month before Tyler went missing. She said the assault happened in the same area of the Missouri River. And then another young lady come forward and said that Joshua sexually assaulted her in 2008 when she was just 15 years old. He was charged with false imprisonment and felony rape in both cases. In March of 2012, he pled guilty to the 2008 case and sentenced to 15 to 20 years, but he was eligible for parole after serving 8 years. Tyler's case went cold. Her mother filed a wrongful death suit against the school and Joshua. The school was actually going to kick him out. He had damaged the school property. He was failing his classes, and 2 other females had sexual harassment charges against him. But despite all of that, the school administration still let Joshua finish the semester and then they was going to let him go. Her mother lawsuit claimed that if Joshua was just expelled when he was supposed to be expelled, none of this would ever happen. But in 2015, a judge dismissed her claim, saying that there's no way that the college could foresee that he was a risk for violent behavior. What? But finally, in 2017, just 2 years shy of his parole date from his 2008 case, Joshua is charged with first-degree murder of Tyler. We still don't have a body or forensic evidence, but we going to trial. In early 2020, a jailhouse snitch testified against Joshua and said that Joshua said that he killed Tyler, but he will never get convicted of it because they will never find her body. His classmates from Peru State College testified and said that Joshua begged them to tell the detective that he was with them all day. Along with all the other outlandish lies he told, Joshua was convicted of second-degree murder. He got a lesser sentence because we still don't have a body. His sentencing was delayed due to the pandemic at the time. But in July of 2020, he was sentenced to 71 years in prison. He is fighting hard with these appeals. I think he literally just did an appeal. But with the lack of evidence, it kind of worries me a little bit. But Tyler Thompson is still missing. Still no trace of her. But let's hope and pray Joshua keep his ass in there.